Hey everybody, it's Big Daddy Liberty here. Guess where I am? Cape Town, and we are at the State of the Nation address. As you can see, the usual security contingent is walking at the band as it moves by, and people are sort of making their way towards what will be the procession of soldiers and cops and mounted units. You know how politicians are in the security forces. It's always a show of force. So with that being said, join me as we try and find some people. Goodness me, the cops have cleared everybody out of the way. Join me as we try and find some people to speak to, as we ask them, what do you expect to hear from President Cyril Ramaphosa? Is it a message of more of the same, the blah 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 of politicians, or do you want to hear tough action and real commitments that deal with the serious issues that we face? Corruption, joblessness, a stagnant economy. These are the issues that I think ordinary people want to hear a president speak to. But don't hear it from me. Let's hear it from the actual people themselves as to what they want to hear. Let's get talking here. Hey man, how you doing? Can I talk to you? Welcome to the Big Liberty Show. It's an online show. What we're doing is we're asking ordinary South Africans what they are expecting the president to be saying in the House today. In fact, what do you want to hear from the president? What are the things that matter to you?
Only thing that I want to hear from the president is about the school. Because at school, students are sleeping outside. They don't have places to sleep. Like here, I'm a student of CPUT.
Yeah.
Student in CPUT, they've been sleeping in piazza.
Yeah.
They don't have places. The school, they don't create place to sleep for students. Even like financially, students have been blocked.
Yeah.
They don't have access for education. They don't register.
Let me cut in there, because obviously this is a very topical issue right now in the country. I mean, there were a few years ago, these streets were filled with students demanding free education. Some were critical of that because they were asking the question, where is that money going to come from? So we have free education now. You seem very unhappy with the current arrangement. Why is that?
I'm not happy because our young South Africans that are in need of education, they don't have access for the higher learning. Because like they even increase the requirements for students to get admitted for the higher learning, whereas they giving them like the lower percentage to pass in high school. Where do they think they're gonna study?
Let me challenge you. Sorry, I have to challenge you. Sorry to cut you short. I'm asking a very specific question. So, for example, and again, I'll make a practical example. You can have a student who studies anthropology or sociology, which is what I studied, right? Those are not immediately required skills in the economy. However, when you call for free education, you're essentially saying that person who's studying that, even though the skill is not necessarily needed, should be essentially fully funded from a very limited tax base, right? Whereas there are other courses or other skills which we should be funding more. For example, the ones I named, right? So the artisanal type skills. What do you think about people who make that distinction to say, if you're going to fund higher education, why don't you focus on the skills that the country actually needs? What do you think about that sort of criticism?
I think like there's no course that I think they like it can have an impact to the education. They created that course in university. They know that in our economy, there is need for that specific course. Because like, I feel like any course in our varsities, they have like something to do with our economy.
Right. Not entirely convinced that the point got across, because again, it's a very serious question that a lot of people are asking. Should we be funding, feminist dance theory or any other of these social science classes where really these are, they suck a lot of state resources and it's money that we don't have, whereas we could be focusing on artisanal skills, the stuff that gets young people into gainful employment quicker, and has them earning an income, building savings, changing their income status. But that's one view. Let's see what other people are saying here. Just follow me as we move along. Here, I see a group of guys. Oh, the group of guys saw me and they ran.
I think the creation of jobs, to me, it matters a lot. Secondly, there are many social ills South Africa is faced with at the present moment. We have the issues of crime. We have the issues of student unrest. So I think, to me, it would be important that the president say something on crime and say something about the student unrest.
Let me quickly jump in here because you're raising what is a very personal and real issue for millions of South Africa. Crime is a massive issue in this country. Let me put something to you and let me hear what you think about the proposal. Now, one of the things I talk a lot on the show when it comes to addressing crime is obviously one, getting our SAPs to the required standard. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, and yes, I'll say it right in front of them, a lot of South Africans have real complaints when it comes to policing in this country. One of the ideas I often push out is, I often say a lot of communities don't know who their station commander is. He's not accountable to them as a community, he's accountable to some official or bureaucrat in Pretoria. What do you think about the idea of every local government election, we also get an opportunity to not only vote in councillors, but vote in your local station commander, so that person is known to the community, he's more accountable. What do you think about an idea like that?
It sounds like a good idea, but I'm not too sure if we are ready to. I mean, I've never had something like that before. But
well, for example, in America, people can actually vote in their local sheriff, and that individual doesn't necessarily have to be
a good idea, but I don't think our country is ready for that at the present moment.
Another suggestion or an idea that I often push out is say, okay, great, policing is one side of it, and you're right, it is one side of it, but also giving community members, ordinary people in the public, more power is an important part of doing this. So what do you think about the idea, for example, of, so as you know, I'm sure at your house too, you probably have burglar bars, you might have even private security, I'm not sure, but South Africans spend a lot of money on securing themselves, right, which is, it's supposed to be a state job, but we often have to put out our own money in order to secure ourselves. So we all have burglar bars, walls, electric fencing. What do you think about the idea if I were to say to you, those people who spend that money on securing their families, securing their homes, should have a tax deductible, a tax rebate, because essentially they're doing what should be the role of the government, but they're doing it themselves, using private money. Would you be open to the idea of getting a tax rebate based on some of the spending you do on securing your family?
Yeah, that could be a best idea. But the thing is, the practicality of that, is that practically feasible for South Africa at the present moment? Yes, we're spending a lot of money buying Peklakat and all that, but I think the idea of getting a rebate out of that, it could be a good idea, but I'm not too sure if it's we are ready as a country.
All right. Hey guys, Big Daddy here. President's just gone by. Lots of excitement from people here. This is a very different mood from when Jacob Zuma was here. In fact, there's not a single protester here. So maybe that's one way in which your country's improved, hasn't it? What are things that you care about as a South African?
I would say maybe job creation and the crime situation in the country. That is what I care about. Check these planes, man.
Oh! Holy shit, that is loud. Now that my hearing has essentially dropped a few decibels, job creation could be me getting a hearing aid right now. That was very loud. I think those were 3 Griffin jets, yes, the same arms steel ones that flew over just now. But let's keep the conversation going.
I would like the president to speak more about education for South Africa, security. You understand, the country must be with enough security. Yeah, that's all I want the president to speak about more. About the country.
Guys, any other opinions? No? No, you don't have to if you don't want to, but it's a very simple question, really. It's not rocket science. I'm not trying to trick anybody. I'm walking amongst ordinary people who are lining the streets today. I'm sure there's something you hope to hear the president speak about. You're a young man. Tell me what's on your mind right now. What should he be speaking about in that house?
What I want the president to speak about. I want him to speak about as me, I'm a foreigner. Yeah, to give us a favor, like to start getting to a permit from asylum. Just we get a permit from it.
Look, there's very large issues on this, and on this show we're a big supporter of people being able to have a much easier pathway to getting a work permit or even a pathway to citizenship, which allows young people like you who are actually coming to this country to work, to be industrious, to get an opportunity to get a shot. That's what life is about. People finding opportunities and seeking to make something work. Tell me about just very briefly, how long have you been in the country and how easy or difficult has it been for you to just get into the system?
Yeah, I've been in the country since 2012. Yeah, so I've been living here, I work here. Country is not too bad, yeah, because I'm enjoying. But I want the president to make us easier just to get a permit.
Most foreign nationals who come to this country come to start businesses. They start entrepreneurial ventures, whether it's a shop on the corner or some opportunity. But again, thanks for your time, man. And well, there you have it again. Honest, ordinary people, whether they're South African or not. And people have high hopes around what this president is going to say in that parliament.
Corruption?
Yep.
He must demolish the corruption. He must give the youth work. He must give back our land. He must give the elders the respect that they deserve. He must also increase the money, the SASSA money, the grant. Yes.
Mama, just a quick question, because these are all very important things and they're common things that I hear a lot from people. So these are important things. When it comes to, let's say, increasing SASSA grants, whether it's the old age pension or child support grants, a lot of people would say, look, the country is in a lot of debt right now. We owe a lot of people a lot of money. Where do you think we could get that money if I were to give you the power to have the ability to deliver on this promise? Where do you think we'll get this money from?
Ramaphosa went out from the country. He said he's going to look for investors. With those investors, he can come with the money and then he can do whatever we're asking him to do, so that ANC can also win the elections. If he keeps his promise, we don't have any doubts he's going to win the elections.
Investment is a very key driver in terms of facilitating the current levels of government spending, although I want to see less of that. But if we are to have it, the money needs to come from somewhere. Investment is one option here that's been cited. You're going to drop it on that.
One of the first issues that I would like him to speak about, our dear President, is the issue of the land. The issue of the land. Our people, they really need the land. Because if you were to go to the township, you'll find the people being squatted around in the squatters. I mean, it shows that the people, they really need the land. Yeah. It's a matter of...
Can I quickly probe you on this one? Land has become the political hot potato that everybody wants to have a say on. Yeah. But I'm not really hearing a substantive conversation around what exactly we should be doing on the issue of land. The ANC has a land reform policy that they've had in place for the past 20 odd years to mixed varying success and failure in some cases. What would you like to see as a policy approach to land? Should we be giving people property rights, the ability to own their land themselves, or should we continue with the current status quo, which is some people, for example, millions of people in former homelands, having lived on that land for generations, still not owning it? They don't have a title deed to that land. What do you think should be the policy approach that we take going forward?
No, I think our government have to issue the people the land, and then they can also make the follow-up, and they can also equip the people in terms of the skills of the agriculture.
Priority. So land is one. The next one?
It's the education. Invest more on education and also the skills. If you look at our country, we're really short of skills. If our government can invest more on education, it will prosper our country. For example, you look at the countries like Cuba. Cuba have invested more on the educational system, and yet they've got the best doctors in the world.
Well, that's questionable, but maybe as I pause you at that point, maybe can I just pause you for a second as we allow the soldiers to go through, and then we'll pick it up just now. You don't have to cut it. Don't cut it. I actually think they're playing Kevu Semenya, if I'm not mistaken. How's that for local? That's local as F. You know about that? All right, the band's gone past. I want to pick up the conversation. We're talking about education. Can I put something to you, and you'll let me know what you think about this idea? On this show, we are a classically liberal show. We have a classical liberal approach to policy. So, for example, South Africa spends the most on education than any other spending area outside of the military. Now, let me put this idea to you. Last year, we spent 369 billion rand on education. What if I told you that we can take that same amount or similar amount and break it up, and I can give each parent a 16,000 rand voucher per child for that parent to then choose where they take their child to get an education. So they can go to a private school, they can go to a what's called a formal model state school, but essentially the decision making is in the hands of a parent. What do you think about an idea like that, putting the power and the resources in the hands of ordinary parents as opposed to officials?
I don't think that would be really a good idea, because at the current moment, we need the youth that is more equipped in terms of skills development. If our government, even though they can put more funding on the education, higher learning, but they can also invest more on the skills development program in terms of like technical colleges. Because
but I'm asking you a very specific thing, if you don't mind. I'm essentially suggesting to you that I could put the power and the decision making and the resources in your hands. So as a parent, are you a parent? What if? Do you not think a system would work if government came to your house, gave you a voucher for 16,000 or however much, and says to you, you decide where to send your child to get an education, whether it's a technicon and a university, that 16,000 rand is cash in your pocket by way of a voucher, and you decide. Would that not work?
I really don't think that will work.
What was your third area of focus? So you gave me land. Or land reform to be specific. You gave me education. What is the third thing you're hoping the president will speak about today?
About also job creation. We need that. We really need that. We also have the factories in the former rural areas, like the places like Eastern Cape, places like Butterworth. We go to East London, Mthatha. Those factories have been closed down ever since our government took over.
What were the reasons for them closing, just out of interest?
Those factories, they were run by the former governments of those states before. And then...
so should government be running things then?
I believe so. If the government can start to own things, and then they can run those factories, and then they can get it to employ more youth.
But what if I told you I'd rather see young people, specifically black people, being the ones who actually own the businesses, who are the entrepreneurs, who are the job creators, who are building the income? Why are we giving government more power when really it's the young, I must say this, black individuals who should be getting more in the way of income opportunities? Don't you think we should be actually shifting the way we think about that in a bit?
Yeah, that would be a good idea, but at the very same time, our government we should have give those people, firstly, the skills in order to run such places.
Okay.
So it also goes back to the issue of government running those places. Then they can equip the youngsters, and then the youngsters now can start to own.
I don't know if I'm convinced by this argument. Sorry to have a little debate, but I think it's necessary that we unpack these ideas. Right now, as we speak, there are many government-run businesses, SAA, Eskom. You can go down the line. There's about 200 plus SOEs, and not only are they running at a loss, they are corrupt entities that are stealing from people like you and me, hardworking people who pay taxes. Now, someone listening to this might go, but hang on, why is this man asking for government to run even more businesses when it should be young people, or even people like you and me, the more older generation, who are the ones who own businesses, who earn the income, who are providing the jobs? Don't you think we really actually do need a shift in mentality away from government owning things and actually people owning things and businesses?
I think that is also a really big challenge also in our constitution. We also need such amendments to our constitution, because even though we can say government must own such places, but then at the very same time, some other parties, they can take our government to courts. That is also loss of some money.
Well, maybe it's the final point. So I know I'm keeping you. I'm sorry about that. I don't think there would be a lot of opposition. I mean, I could test the idea right now on this crowd. If I had to say to people, should we be breaking down some of the state-owned businesses and essentially putting that same power and resources in the hands of young entrepreneurs who will be mostly black? I mean, this is a majority black country. Not that that is an issue, but essentially that's what you want. You want to see more young black industrialists. If I had to ask people here, maybe shouldn't we be doing that, putting that power, the resources into their hands? I think most people would say yes. What do you think about that? Should we not be really empowering people to be the owners of things, whether it's land, businesses, as opposed to government and politicians?
No, that will also be a good idea for as long as our government will finance those people. That will be a good idea.
All right, I'm hearing a lot of government, and maybe that's the problem that we have at the moment. There's just way too much government. The fact that we have to stand and watch a president go by because what he says is important, for me is a bit of a problem when actually the power and the resources should be in the hands of young people. Speaking about young people, and I'm hoping they'll accept me segueing like that. Guys, I think you've heard the questions. And I can see there's something pre-planned over here, which I'll accept. The show takes all ideas. You guys are clearly students, if I may safely assume that, and I can see the usual slogans popping up behind me, or behind you, sorry. Free education, but let me ask you the question as I've asked everybody else. President's about to walk into there. In fact, correction, he's probably inside there. Top 3 priorities that you would want to hear him speak about that affect your life?
To be quite honest with you, nothing from Cyril Ramaphosa, because its promises nothing concrete. But if he has a president who had the political will, we'd want him to speak of the issue of the students, the issue of land. It's a very thorny issue that everyone's speaking about these days. The issue of growing the economy, having more industrialists, black industrialists, building economies, building factories. And I think the CIC was very clear last week in the manifesto launch. CIC.
Who's that?
Julius Malema.
Okay.
Oh yeah, there's only one CIC.
Yeah, but international audience, they might not know who that is.
Yeah. Julius Malema was very clear when it comes to industrialists. So if, for instance, a young person wants to build a factory in the township, employ people, we give you tax exemption as an incentive by the government to say, hey, go to the townships, open those factories that used to be there back in the day growing up. That is how we create and grow the economy. Everything needs to be produced in South Africa. We really can't be importing toothpicks, vaslabs that we use on a daily basis. Those are things that our people are capable of actually producing themselves. Here in Cape Town, for instance, Salt River and Woodstock used to have a lot of factories which have closed down because of the DA government buying those factories, making properties, selling them to overseas owners and so forth. People are...
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you a little bit there. This show is very big on facts. We're non-partisan, by the way, so I'm just making that point. I don't think it's so much a DA government that did that, more than it is industrial policy in this country that applies across the country. If you go to places like Newcastle, parts of Durban, even parts of Industria in Johannesburg, you'll find the same thing of former industrial areas having closed down.
Those areas. I'm based in Cape Town, DAs in Cape Town.
I'm with you. Then maybe let me add the context then, because it's actually industrial policy across the country, which has made it very difficult for entrepreneurs who are in the industrial space to compete with people across the globe. Why? Because we've seen, for example, Asian countries producing things cheaper, skilling their workers, and South Africa is not immune to that. We need to compete. Unfortunately, industrial policy and labor policy has made it more expensive for our entrepreneurs to compete. So it's not so much a DA government thing. And again, I'm not really defending the DA. I could care less about them. The point I'm making is, perhaps just to stick to the facts, it's about industrial policy. So you've spoken about the EFF. How do you think the EFF is going to address this issue of making South African businesses, and including young entrepreneurs like you may become, more competitive on a global
Look, of course, as I've mentioned to you, some of the issues that the CIC alluded to last week in the manifesto launch.
You were there, by the way?
Yeah, I saw you the interview with Siyabonga Sasha.
Sorry, I didn't get names. I'm really sorry about that.
No, it's
so,
fine.
Siyabonga, if you're watching this, I'm now giving you the shout out.
Yeah, the EFF outlined everything. It starts with ownership of land, most important, because, for instance, for any business or any factory to be, there has to be land. Now, when the government becomes a custodian of the land, as a young entrepreneur, I go to the government and say, hey, I want this piece of land, this is what I want to do with it. On top of that, I get tax exemption because I'll be building a factory in the township, employing people. So those are things that we can look into, and government investing more in young people, because like the NYDA is useless. There's no point of actually having that. So it's time that the government puts the money directly into young entrepreneurs and cut off all these middlemen that you have to go through to get the funding.
Again, I hear you on a lot of these points, but there's one point that I want to stick to, because it's actually quite, it speaks to the economic issues around this. You mentioned the idea of government owning land. I just finished having a conversation with a guy now where I said, is that really a good idea? I mean, we place so much trust on this institution called government that we wanted to control so many aspects of our lives, but shouldn't things like land ownership be in the hands of individuals like you? And really, when I speak about individuals, we're a family society, so ownership would take the form of families. Shouldn't South African families, black and white, be the ones that own their land, where you have a secure title deed and you know that no politician can come and confiscate that from you, whether you think it's right or wrong for them to do that? Shouldn't we be building that sort of society as opposed to one where the government becomes this massive monolith that owns everything and we almost have to come with begging bowls to get something from them? What sort of society do you think is actually more preferable?
I think the EFF actually outlines that very clearly. The government becomes a custodian of the land. Who is the government? The people.
Is it really though? I mean, Marikana miners might disagree with that.
That's
a whole lot of people who have faced state violence might disagree with that.
True.
A lot of people who have failed by government might disagree with that.
Remember.
There is a distinction between, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off like that, but there is a very big distinction between government and an individual and families, because on this show we talk a lot about individuals and families and not necessarily in broad terms of government or the people, or like we need to talk about exactly who we're talking about when we're addressing the issue of who gets empowered, the individual and families or the politician and government.
But remember, Chief, as I alluded to you, I'm not here to speak on behalf of this current ANC government. You know what I mean? Because we're speaking of the EFF government. Ideally, May comes, EFF wins. This is what we're going to do. You know, I can't speak for ANC government.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to smile. It's just 6% to a win. Some people might say that's quite a stretch, but our polling does reflect. Our polling does.
Time and space is very important in politics. You never know. This election will be tightly contested. The EFF might win. We might become quite a big player in the elections and the outcomes. You know what I mean? And
well, don't get me wrong. Just to support your point, our polling did reflect at the last poll that EFF from their current 6%, we're polling at 13%. Now that's phenomenal growth for a party that's just been, in parliament for 4.5 plus years. Maybe to come back to the point, and this is a bit of a philosophical debate that I want us to have because it's important. The idea of who owns things in this country, who prospers in this country. Is it more of the same, politicians and government and state officials, or for once, do we do something truly radical and put power and resources into the hands of families?
Is that relating to land?
It could be relating to anything, right? So, for instance, on businesses, the previous conversation which you heard, we spoke about state-owned enterprises, and I said, really, we should be scrapping the number of state-owned enterprises and rather empowering young entrepreneurs, the innovators, the ideas guys, to be the ones who build industry, create jobs, build income. My basic outlook is this, and I want you to engage it. My basic outlook is power and resources should be in the hands of individuals and families and not in the hands or even in the decision-making of politicians and government. What do you think is wrong with that approach?
Everything about it. The reason why I say that is because in any economic growth or industrialization, government has to play a central role.
Why?
I'll give you a practical example. Let's look at Toyota, for instance. Japanese-owned, state-owned. Look at how massive it is. No. It was started by the Japanese government. Look at how big it is now, Toyota.
And Toyota used to be a...
Look at China.
I just want to get the facts on that. That's not actually true.
You can check it out. Toyota.
No, Toyota used to be a sewing company. It was always privately owned. What you're maybe alluding to is that...
When it became the car manufacturer.
Just hang on. Government put in place policies that allowed an entrepreneur to take... essentially take a risk, find opportunity and build a car manufacturing company. So again, policy was more important.
Who played a vital role to building Toyota to what it is today?
The entrepreneur.
Government.
The entrepreneur.
Invested a lot of money. Me and you, we can agree on that because the government of Japan invested a lot of money in Toyota.
Where did the government get that money?
From the people. That's why I said.
Where do the people get the money?
That's where we're going back again. The government is the people.
No, it isn't.
Mind the current status quo. I'm talking about. Ideally, as I mentioned to you, that if the EFF wins, this is how we're going to run government. Government is the people is the government. That's what I'm saying to you. So what the government does, they do it with the people, for the people.
Okay, I'm sorry to keep cutting you because it's important, and this is why it's important. These are slogans. These are not policy issues, they're not policy breakdowns. So I can also, for example, say, the people should own this. What do I mean by that? I could literally say something which means everything to everyone. So I'm trying to whittle it down, and I'm sorry if this comes across as, overly, so we're going into the weeds a little bit. But it's important because this is the conversation the country should be having. Who owns, who builds, who creates, who becomes prosperous? Politicians and government, or people and families, because that is the actual philosophical issue of our time. And unfortunately, we've been listening to politicians talk a lot about what they'll do for us, what their government will do for us, but really, we've had 20 plus years. In fact, no, let me go back. We've had almost 100 plus years of governments doing things for this country, whether it's the colonial government and their absolute shit show. Yes, I swore on my show. It's the first time I'm swearing on it, and I will not edit that out. The colonial government with this absolute nonsense that it did in this country, from the hut and pole tax in 1910, the 1913 Land Act, and all sorts of industrial policy which essentially shaped the country that we live today. And again, to apartheid, which, as you would know, with its racial-based legislation and its ownership of so many things in the economy, created a pariah states in this country. And of course, this current government, which I know you have criticisms of, but I wonder why then, if you're criticizing this government, and I'm assuming you criticize the apartheid and the colonial one, why then you think politicians, they may be your favorite politicians, but why they should have the power to decide on people's lives once again? Shouldn't people decide their course and choose what they want to do and build the society they want? What are we doing in this country?
I partly agree with you with people, individuals choosing what they want to do. But big again, when it comes to us, when the EFF becomes government, we will change the whole model. First and foremost, as you might have heard, we're scrapping provinces. There's only one state, so everything moves from national to local government. So you're cutting off the middleman, more to say. That's more direct to the people. Secondly, we're reducing the cabinet. We'll be getting rid of all the deputy ministers, which are quite frankly useless, because most of us don't even know who they are, and putting the power to the people, where you can deal directly with the minister from local government.
Just a quick question. You're cutting a lot of the politics, I hear it, but will you be cutting also the size of government, the number of government officials that work in the departments you'll be cutting? Like, are you just doing cosmetic cuts, or are you actually cutting
No.
We're
doing a total remodeling of the state, so to speak. And most importantly, we'll also be building the state capacity, whereby we do away with tenders. I mean, government should not have a problem with fixing potholes. I mean, we've been in government for 20 years. We should now at least have a small Anyana department from Public Works that can fix that.
So if I'm hearing you correctly here, you're not really going to be cutting government, you're just rearranging it, and by the sounds of it, growing its size. I mean, when you talk about state capacity, you're suggesting a growth in...
Strategically, because...
What does that mean?
You're cutting off deputy ministers, which are quite useless. You're doing away with the middleman, which is provincial government. You're building state capacity, whereby from national to local government.
Sorry, it's just a bookmark. So are you saying that you'd fire every government employee at a provincial government in order to cut the size of the state? What does that mean?
No, we're not saying. We're just saying we're doing away with this, having 9 different provinces. So those people, they'll be redirected.
That's quite an expensive wage bill.
How is that? It's actually expensive as it is now. But now
you want to grow it.
What happens once you actually do away with the 9 provinces, that means that services get directly to the people. There's no middlemen. For instance, I'll give a case in point. The Minister of Health, Aaron Mutwenedi, whenever he's asked, why is the state of hospitals in, we know the state they're in, he always says that each province has its own policies. Now, once you remove that red tape, that means that national government can have direct impact on the lives of the people on the ground, because it moves from national to local. There's no provincial. So now the ministers won't have any excuses to say no, that the Western Cape has their own policies, KZN has their own policies. We're bringing the services to the people directly.
Let me put a spanner in that, in the works. Some people might say, well, the problem we have right now is that in a country of 55 million people, of course people will be different, and of course regions will be different. Why should someone who lives in the Western Cape have their life dictated, or rather controlled, if you will, through policy by someone who doesn't even live here or even understand his reality, someone who's based in Pretoria in some plush office near the Union buildings? What does that person know about someone's life here in the Western Cape, when if you're saying what I think you want to say, actually leadership should be devolved to the local level possible, empowering the local leadership, so your mayor, for example, becomes more important than the president, or becomes more important than the minister. Shouldn't that be the system, a more federal type system, so that you recognize individual differences in an area? What do you think about that?
That's the thing. When you talk about nation building, are we not all South Africans? Because that question of yours actually bothers into tribalism. Because now you have the analogy that if you're in KZN, you're Zulu, we should classify.
I'm not saying that.
No, I'm just saying.
I want to hear
you know what I mean? Yeah. So what are you saying is that we're all South Africans at the end of the day, whether you speak Tswana or whatever language you're speaking, we're all South Africans. We all should have equal services.
No, absolutely. I'm speaking more to governance. I'm not speaking to
governance. Because for instance,
governance, right? Yeah.
Yes, I'll give you a point. For instance, the schools in the Western Cape, everyone knows that they are better than the ones in the Eastern Cape. Why is that? Because of provincial government. So National Minister of Education can argue and say, look, nothing to do with me. The Eastern Cape Provincial needs to deal with that. Now, when everyone is under the same ministry, for instance, the national ministry, so now the minister will have to take responsibility to say, hey, why is the school in Cape Town different to those in East London? There's no excuse. They have to be the same.
But that person's still very far away from what happens in the Eastern Cape. Right now, let me speak to what's happening right now.
Say now. For instance, Ramaphosa is the president of the whole country.
Yep.
Exactly. So why can't we have a minister of health that oversees the whole country? A minister of police that oversees the whole country?
We already have that right now.
We don't. Because as I'm telling you now, the Minister of Health's argument is that each province has its own policies, which is why hospitals in the Western Cape are better than the ones in the Eastern Cape and rural provinces.
Is that really why, though?
That's what he's saying. We don't know.
Can I challenge this view? And it's going to be frank and really to the point. Government services in this province are marginally better than in other provinces because you have a provincial government here which focuses on doing the right things. And on focusing on doing the right things, I'm putting it to you that if another province or another region in this country did exactly the same, you'd have better outcomes. So that the issue isn't who is controlling, or rather the issue isn't whether there is a national or there isn't a national minister, but rather whether politicians at a local level, one, feel that they are held accountable to the people who vote for them directly. And you could argue, for instance, that the DA government here feels directly accountable to its voters here. We're heading to an election right now. What do you think the DA is doing? It's going to be knocking on doors here saying, hey, look, we did a good job, you gave us your vote, you trusted us, and we did marginally better than the rest of the country. The same thing will be happening in the Eastern Cape, that we're talking about now. Those politicians will be saying, hey, look at us, we did a good job, and guess what's going to happen? Those people might say, well, no, you didn't do a good job, that's why we want to vote for the EFF, right? So, for example, that's the argument you were making. And I'm arguing to you that actually that system is much better, where people can vote in directly the individual who governs their area and understands their area, as opposed to, if I may finish the point, as opposed to trusting someone and his officials in some centralized office in Pretoria, far removed from them. What do you think about that?
I think you're missing the point here. We're not scrapping local government. You can still vote for who directly deals with on a daily basis.
And why do you need the national government?
For instance, Helen Zille is a premier of the Western Cape. There's a mayor of Cape Town. So Helen Zille does not only oversees the Cape Town. So you can directly vote for someone who's going to represent you in your city that you stay in. And then you can also have a choice to represent a councillor that represents your ward. That is direct local governance.
Out of interest.
Now,
why do you then need...
With the issue of provinces. For instance, you can't compare all provinces and treat them on the same scale.
Why?
For instance, Western Cape, we all know Western Cape, most of its come from the wine, grapes, tourism. Gauteng, mines, whatever, Northwest, and there are provinces such as the Eastern Cape where they don't have much to go about. To add on the province.
Come on, that's not a good. That's a cop-out argument. The Eastern Cape, as I said on this show, we deal with facts and hard data. If I were to,
give me a chance. And then in terms of apartheid development, Eastern Cape is far behind when it comes to development. We all can agree on that, because the apartheid government, Western Cape, Gauteng, and a bit of Free State. Now those homelands, your KZN, your rural provinces, development has been lacking.
Why?
Now that's what I'm saying, because of apartheid, the legacy that we took from the apartheid.
Apartheid is half the story.
But now
we've had 25 years of democracy.
The ANC government has failed to directly impact the people's life on the ground because of all these red tapes. Provincial government, it has to go to.
It's not just provincial. You're avoiding the national one because I think you can see where I'm going with this. But I'll let you finish your point.
What about national government?
Land reform happens at a national level. And I'm basically saying to you that that's exactly the problem. And you're saying you want more of that problem, but you think it'll be better because your politicians will be in power. And I'm basically making the point that no politician really should have that sort of power. Power should rest in the hands of people and communities and families, really. And let me be precise and specific. When you look at a province like the Eastern Cape, or any province that had homelands in particular, the major issue for the people who live there is, one, they were never given property rights. In other words, no family in Eastern, or very few families.
In the Western Cape, how many black people were given property rights? We know what happened in District 6. We know what happened in Buka. People were moved forcefully to...
And you're absolutely right. And that's still the same problem of what is experienced in someone in the homeland. So you're not disagreeing with me. You're almost helping me make my point, which is, if you then address the issue of property rights, number one, in other words, if I were to go to the Transkei or KZN where I'm from, by the way, I'm a victim of this too. We have a piece of land in there, in Nestanga, Kwamapumulo, that we've lived on for more than 7 generations, but we've never had, and we still don't have, a title deed to it. So do you think a young a young potential entrepreneur, agri entrepreneur like me, is going to take a risk of getting a loan, developing that piece of land, building a agri-processing whatever, right? And then have the potential of an official, whether it's the Induna or a government official, coming and saying, actually, you don't own this land, we're going to confiscate what happens on this land. That is the problem you have right now. People who've lived on land can't invest in it because they literally cannot fence it off, for example. Because it's well,
No. I'll give you practical examples. There's a thing we call security of tenure. We know in Stellenbosch, most of the farms, people sign contracts of 99 years, some of them 100 years with the municipality. So you can actually security of tenure. So you sign a lease with the government for however, let's say 90 years, 100 years, for argument's sake. That land can be inherited from one generation to the next. That's what is happening in China
You've painted yourself into a bit of a corner, and it's funny you mentioned Stellenbosch. What do you think happens to the people in Stellenbosch if the politicians who've been calling them Stellenbosch Mafia, we're going to come and take your land, what do you think happens when a hostile... Hang on, hear the point. All right, he's taking a call. But the question I'm going to ask him is, stop trusting government, because what happens to those same Stellenbosch farmers who are called Stellenbosch Mafia and the League of White Gentlemen and blah, 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 all the things that we hear politicians say. If those same politicians come into power, what do you think is going to happen to the land of those people who live on leased land and not land that they actually own with title deeds? And I want him to answer that question. He's walking away. He's on his phone, in fairness. I want him to answer that question because it speaks to the issue of land in places like where I'm from, Mapumulo or even Epolela, where many people don't have secure title deeds. And depending on how a politician feels about you, they can come and say, hey, we're confiscating this land or we're taking this land because we feel it should go to someone else. And I can't do anything about that because I don't have a title deed. I don't own that land. So I'm hoping you can reconcile that point. I'm going to pause the video at this stage. If you see a bit of a cut, deal with it. It's the Big Liberty Show. Keep tuned. And we're back. Okay, he was talking to his mom, Shame. You know, Mama called and was saying, dinner's ready, where are you? But Big Daddy's holding him back. So let me just delay him for a few more minutes and then we'll wrap this up. Yeah. So look, we're talking about land, and really the conversation got to the philosophical nub of it, the idea of who owns the land. Should it be the politicians who can decide at a whim because they give you a 99-year lease, or they can take that lease away from you? They own the land. Yeah. Or should it be owned by the people who live there with title deeds that are secure and transferable? In other words, they choose who they transfer them to. It's either an heir or a relative, whatever. You know, the choice is theirs, essentially. The power is theirs. And you're going to make the argument, I think, that government should be the ones who own it and essentially decide who gets it. But now, you raised the issue, for example, the Stellenbosch, or just the example of Stellenbosch and how they have 99-year leases. And then I said to you, well, hang on, there are politicians right now, and your favorite politicians are one of them, who rail often against the Stellenbosch Mafia and the Stellenbosch landowners, how they're quote-unquote land thieves. What do you think is going to happen to those 99-year leases of those same Stellenbosch farmers if your favorite politician comes into power? Do you think they're really as secure on that land as you claim and lease can make you be?
Yeah, they would be secure, because what the EFF guarantees is security of tenure. So how this is how it works. You identify a piece of land, you go to the EFF government, you say, hey guys, I want this piece of land, this is what I want to do with it. We give it to you, security of tenure, 10 years, argument's sake. If we see that in that 10 years you're not using that land for the purpose that you've said, we come to you nicely and say to you, hey, Big Daddy, you said you're going to use this for this and that, but you're not doing that. This land is laying fallow, nothing's been done on it, so we're taking it, giving to someone else that needs the land. Now, the issue of Stellenbosch mafias that you so passionately speak about, the issue there, it's very simple. We're saying to them that, okay, you have 100 hectares piece of land. You only use about 20 hectares. The other 80 is laying fallow, nothing's been done on it. So that's where the EFF government comes in and expropriate without compensation the other 80, give it to other emerging farmers that want to use the land to be productive, increase production, food production and food security. That's how simple it is. So I think the EFF is very clear when it comes to its land policies, its security of tenure, which is very important. Use it or lose it. Very simple.
My final point
but then again, that only speaks to commercial land mostly. Okay. You know what I mean? But when it comes to residential land, obviously we'll have to secure of tenure. It's very important. Let a title deeds that you own that piece of land. But when it comes to commercial land, because remember, we're facing possibly a security food crisis. We might be facing one. And we also need to make sure that we use our beautiful land. We are blessed. It's a fertile land that you can almost grow anything in South Africa.
All right, I'm hearing another politics come in.
Make more money for the fiscal of the country.
Let me stick to the hard data, the hard facts.
Yeah.
You know, you speak a lot about security of tenure. This will be my final point. but you're not really making the point around, for example, what you basically said here, and I want to decode into ordinary speak, so to speak. You basically said, look, I'm quite happy with a politician having the power to decide what happens on my land. And if that politician is unhappy with me and what I'm doing on the land, that politician, or she, that politician, has the power to essentially come with cops on the door, or soldiers, because that's how state power is enforced, through guns, violence. That same politician can come on my gate and tell me I'm taking your land or a portion away from it. Now, what do you think happens? Now, let's say I'm the farmer, and I say, no, I'm not giving my land away. This is the land we've been living on for 7 generations, whether it's leased or not. But we've lived on this land for X amount of time. This is our land. I stand at the gate with my gun and I say, I'm defending my land. This is where my children have been born, where my grandfather was born, blah, blah, blah. You can imagine the scenario. What do you think happens to me when I try and defend that land and my family? Those same police officers, those same soldiers would essentially kill me. Why?
Okay, I think
they're killing me for something I own. So I'm putting it to you quite directly. Why do you want to give politicians the power to essentially confiscate things that are owned and should be owned by ordinary people like you and me? How is that morally right?
Once again, there's a difference between politicians and the government. I say to you, the government becomes a custodian of the land, and the government has certain structures and institutions that will be put in place, such as the land court. We will have to restructure that, make it more forceful, land councils. That's the processes that people have to follow. Even when you apply for land, you don't go to Julius Malema and say, hey, Mr. Malema, I see that piece of land, this is what I want to use for it. There's a certain process you have to follow in order for us to secure that tenure for you.
You're being a bit sneaky. You're being a bit
I'm not being sneaky. That's what I'm saying to you. That's what I'm saying to you.
You're almost pretending as if these same structures, which have been corrupted today, you're somehow suggesting that, just because when it's the EFF that's running them, they won't be corrupted, or it's impossible to capture them.
They won't be.
What guarantee can you give us that? Because an ANC
What guarantee do you have that there will be?
The ANC, right now, an ANC person can stand in front of me and say, but we have, land courts, which there are right now. We have institutions of government, like the Department of Rural Development, that's tasked with, rolling out land reform. Those can't be corrupted. Now, we have a Zondo commission right now that is speaking to just how easy it is for a corrupt network of crooked politicians, crooked business people, and essentially crooked cronies capturing institutions that you speak of, and essentially perverting them for the benefit of their cronies. What suddenly stops that from happening just because your favorite politicians are in power?
Okay, seeing that you're dealing with individuals and politicians, it's a nice point that you've mentioned. The Zondo Commission, for instance, you gave example of the Zondo Commission. None of the EFF leaders were ever mentioned in that commission.
But you see, that's irrelevant. The EFF don't really have power.
Because you asked me a question of corruption.
But the EFF don't have state power, so I'm putting it to you as a presupposition of them having that state power.
The EFF, as you mentioned, it was only formed 5 years ago. So at some point, our leaders were in the ANC. They were kingmakers in the ANC. We can't run away from that. But no way.
And they were beneficiaries of the very sort of crony system I talk about.
Where?
Well, again,
exactly. You said we're dealing with facts here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which court of law or which commission say that Mr. Malema, Mr. Flo Chivambo, and whoever else leads the EFF was involved in this and this and that and that?
Yeah, fair point.
I mean,
fair point. But let me answer you directly. Let me answer you directly. It's a fair point, but it's also disingenuous, because if you have a political system that over the years erodes the efficacy of your law enforcement agencies, erodes the efficacy of a working, what was then a state institution that was dealing with corrupt politicians, the Scorpions, if you have a same political system that erodes the efficacy of investigative ability in this country, including the National Prosecuting Authority, then it comes back full circle. The idea, why should I trust those same politicians when they have the power to erode the very institutions you speak about that will keep them in check?
But then again, that also goes back to what I was saying to you, that the current government, it's not what you're looking to. The moment we go into power, we're changing everything. That's what I said to you in the beginning. So
but a DA person would say the same thing to me. Why should I trust any of you? But the point I'm making is, why should I trust any of you?
Yeah, give me a chance. Yep. For instance, let's look at Mr. Malema's tax issues. When he was in the Youth League, no issues, fine, was not paying taxes for whatever number of years. As soon as he left the ANC, that's when it started coming up. People were following themselves, were following him up. So that actually speaks to something, that when you're within the ANC, it's okay to be corrupt. Nothing will be done to you. We will protect you, your cronies. we comrades, to cadres. Cadre deployment is very important. We protect each other.
Is there a fighter deployment coming?
No, we don't have such in there. We go for the best people who are qualified. Yeah. So now what we're saying to you is that we need to restructure the whole government system and how government works so that it becomes appealing for the people. This thing of majority of the youth, for instance, not voting, it's not something we can be proud of. That simply speaks something that the youth has no faith in what we're doing as politicians and has no faith in the democratic system of South Africa. So we need to deal with that decisively. That is why we're saying to you in the EFF...
Decisively?
Decisively.
Sounds threatening.
We're saying to you that in the EFF, when we come into government, we will do things differently. And by doing things differently, we will root out corruption with its roots. And we even said in the EFF that in the EFF government, there won't be fighter deployment, as you called it. We're going for the best person with the best skill to do the job. For instance, when it comes to, let's say now, we might take over mayorship in Tshwane after the election. When we do that, the MMC won't be an EFF person necessarily. It will be the best person with the best qualification to do the job. That's the kind of government we want. That thing of, yeah, you're an ANC secretary, branch secretary, you must come and run this municipality. It needs to stop. We are South Africans, we need to
agree on that.
Men and women to do the job. That's the kind of government we want, which is open, transparent, and speaks directly to the issues of the people. Hence, we're saying that we need to cut off all the middlemen, the provincial government, so that national government can deal directly with local government to take services to the people.
All right.
For instance, you said for me you're from KZN. Funny enough, there was an issue in KZN recently of money that went missing for water relief and whatever. You know what I mean? No one can account for that. But if it was that
220 million, I think.
Million, exactly. No one can account for that because there's what? Too many middlemen in betweens. But now,
is that why or just really was it a system of politicians and the same cronies, politicians and their same cronies who essentially create a system where they can siphon off state funds, which again, but if you say that, then I wonder why you can still segue to the view of somehow we should give those same politicians different colors, fair enough, but same political system, same politicians, even more power to be able to have more access to state funds, when I'm arguing actually those same state funds should be devolved as much as possible into the hands of communities and families. Like I speak a lot about individuals on the show, but we're a family society.
But then how do we do that effectively? Because I remember...
Can I give an example?
Of the school.
I mean, that's one... I mean, so let me just quickly jump into it again. Vouchers are a very important tool in that regard. So you asked me the question, how do you devolve money into the hands of families? Well, one way you could do it is say, why should the state run a bulky administration, a bulky, network, if you will, of hospitals, when already in this country you have a private sector which does it better, and you can't disagree with that because people literally will do anything and everything to save, scrimp, and put together some sense in order to have some form of medical aid that gives them access to that. And I'm saying, why don't you give poor people that very same access by essentially taking money out of the hands of government and putting it into the hands of individuals? So for instance, the education budget, let me stick to education. Instead of government spending on an inefficient education department where they're stifled by unions such as SATU, which they happen to have a crony relationship with anyway, why don't you take that same money, last year it was 369 billion, break it up by the number of parents and their kids, and give each of that parent, sort of calculated roughly, could be about 16,000 rand per child for a parent. A voucher for them to decide where they go and get that education. You kill two birds with one stone. Let me tell you the first bird. Let me go into the first bird. The first bird is one, you've created demand. So suddenly there are millions of parents with kids who have capital, and you mean to tell me if there's demand like that there wouldn't be young black entrepreneurs like maybe you and me who'd start quality schools like your Curos and, there are Spark schools, for example, which are brilliant, by the way. You mean to tell me there wouldn't be a rising of entrepreneurs to meet that demand and still provide a quality education in the townships where that doesn't exist at the moment, in the rural areas where that doesn't exist in the moment? You mean to tell me that wouldn't happen, number one? Number two, if I empower the parent to have that choice, you mean to tell me that parent would still take their child to the same school where even the SATU educators don't take their kids to get an education? Of course not. A parent is self-interested, a parent cares about their children, and if you empower the parent to be the decision maker, you'd see overall better results than currently relying than currently relying on politicians to do that. What do you think about that?
Your immediate reaction is that wouldn't work, because it basically then does away what we're aiming for. Quality education for all.
Oh, I disagree.
And
tell me there's
this
no
is
quality in private at the moment?
no.
People
What I'm
flock
saying,
into
what I'm saying that
private because of the
equality in terms of free, equal education for everyone. What that does, for instance, now you're a parent, you're already taking your son or child to Kuro. Now the government gives you the 16,000 voucher. That means you have more money. So you're taking your child to a much better school.
All parents would have it.
You know what I
Poor
mean?
ones.
But what I'm saying to you, what we should be focusing as the
Hang on,
government.
deal with
What
that.
I'm saying
Deal
to
with
you.
that, because I'm saying to you, I'm empowering directly the poor individual, and you're saying I want to empower the politicians
What I'm saying
to
to you is
control
that
the
there'll
poor
always be
people.
that inequality, and that's what you want to do away with. There should be free, equal education for everyone. The quality of education you
But I've given you a way of doing that.
That's not an effective way of doing it. The effective
How?
way of doing it is to make sure that, because remember, in society, we'll not always be equal in terms of financial strength.
And we shouldn't be. That's why I'm giving each of those who are less in financial strength the means to be able to afford quality.
So those that already can qualify won't get, or those that can afford won't get the 16,000 grand. What are you saying?
You can work out the specificities.
Because remember, there's a difference between equality and equity. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm trying to understand to you.
Well,
for instance, let's make it practical. We're both parents.
Yep.
Your monthly salary is 30,000 minus 10,000. You take a child to.
My monthly salary is zero. Let's create a.
So both of us are zero.
No. So you're the well-off parent.
Yeah,
You make a monthly income of 40,000 rand.
Yeah.
Right. So you're the well-off parent, and your kid currently is in a private or semi-private school.
Yeah.
I'm the poor parent. My kid is in a very bad school where I live because that's really the only option I have. That's the free education that is provided for and that's the only thing I can afford.
Yeah.
Now, Big Daddy is saying, well, hang on, I can give that parent, the poor parent, 16,000 rand to dispense with in a voucher for them to decide. Now, are you telling me, as the poor parent, that I wouldn't find the best opportunity I can find for 16,000 rand for my kid?
So,
away from
between the two of us, you're the only one who's getting the 16,000.
So, for instance, you could work that out. So, I'm not really being prescriptive in how I say. So, you could.
But then you see your model has flaws, because now what's going to happen? No. For instance, what's going to happen to all of those? What's going to happen to all of those bad schools that you alluded to?
Well, you see, that's the other bird, or rather, that's the other bird who killed the stone. If you, let me answer your question directly. Give me a chance to answer your question directly. If you're dealing with bad quality schools, and you suddenly give the parent the opportunity to choose where to send their schools, what do you think happens to bad schools? In other words, let me be precise and specific. There is I think, a game over there somewhere, and possibly another retailer, I think Woolworths, across the road. If everybody here decided, no, Game's food is of a poorer quality, we're all going to shop at Woolies. What do you think Game's going to do? They're going to up their game. See what I did there? They're going to up their game, and they're going to make sure that they have good quality. They're going to make sure they have good quality. They make sure their staff is more serving and accommodating to customers. Basically, they'll do what they can to attract that business back to them. I'm arguing you can do the exact same thing if you create an education market, and guess who wins? The poor parents.
Once again, I don't think that would work. As I've given you the examples, no.
Right.
What we should be focusing on is to.
No, tell me why it wouldn't work.
Yeah, this is what I'm getting at. Because there's a lot of red tape, as we've mentioned to you. How do you then split up these vouchers? Who gets these vouchers? Who doesn't get these vouchers? Yeah. Secondly, it still perpetuates the culture of inequality.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to let you get away with that. There's no red tape there. It's quite simple.
Because I asked you a question because you used the example between me and you. You're the parent with no income. Who gets the voucher? Do you both get the voucher? Because if you both get the voucher, that means that I have double the income. You only have one. The inequality is still there. So what we should be focusing on?
I'm focusing on the poor parent. So if you don't need the voucher and I don't have to give it to you, I won't give it to you, I'll give it to the parent who needs it. And you can do, for example, you're trying to trap it into weird metrics. So, where, for example, that same government can just simply focus on a means test and say any parent under a certain threshold gets the voucher.
Now, you're giving context to what you're saying.
Again, it's almost self-evident because ultimately I focus on the poor parent and not necessarily on the parent who has the means. Equally, a parent who has the means will not be bothered by what the government is doing as long as government's doing right by poor people. And my policy approach does exactly that. So how exactly is my policy approach not going to work or bad or should be disregarded? Like, tell me in detail as a final point.
Yeah. As a final point.
It's getting a little late and your mama did call you. Don't lie on camera. No, all right, tell me.
No. Look, with the context that we've just given now, it might work if it is actually managed. But as we all know, with the current government, that would be a nightmare because administratively, they're the worst government ever. Look at how they're failing already with NSFAS. Something very easy. Someone applies, you fund them. Simple, the money is there. But then administratively, they're failing the students. Now, the
context. You're saying it would work, but the administration needs to get it.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. With the context that we've just given to me. Yeah, I agree with you with the context that you've given to me.
Hey, man. Thank you for your time. Watch the show, please. Subscribe. Tell your friends to subscribe. And thank you for your time.
Thanks, man. Enjoy your stay in Cape Town, guys.
Thanks, brother. Again, I keep saying this, man. People go back to slogans that they're comfortable with, but it's the ideas. And when you sell the ideas to them and when you share the ideas with them, people actually realize, hey, actually, hang on, that might work. And that is something that can address a lot of the inequality he speaks about. Again, inequality in and of itself isn't the problem. The issue is there are poor people who have poor options right now. How do you give those poor people better options, and how do you give them the resources to decide what they do? Guys, it's been a long day. It's been a great day. Shout out to everybody who made this day happen, including SAPS, who, in all fairness, they did a good job. They kept everybody safe. The president is in that house right now speaking, and you heard some of the things that ordinary South Africans are looking to hear. Jobs came out, corruption came out, top of the list. It isn't abstract things like expropriation without compensation or etc. etc. It isn't the political jargon that comes out. It's ordinary everyday issues, and I think the president should be speaking to those. Guys, thank you so much for joining the Big Liberty Show as we discuss the SONA and what's happening in the House. As always, thank you to those who support the show. It's guys, trust me, it really helps. It helps me get to locations. It helps me do these sort of videos and helps me bring them to you. So please keep supporting. You can do that by becoming a friend of the IRR. Simply SMS your name to 32823 and someone will call you. There are terms and conditions that apply. Or just, hey, visit us online, irr.org.za/join, and sign up. It's a monthly support. I mean, my average is about 90 Rand per month from each person, and it really does help us create this quality content for you. As always, please like, share, comment. What do you think about the show? I do try and respond to a lot of the comments, but keep the conversation going, and please share this as widely as possible. Guys, this has been the Big Liberty Show here in Cape Town. Your favorite fat boy is signing out.